Hi, my name is Christy, and this podcast is my pursuit to glean practical wisdom on femininity, homemaking, finances, and relationships from the God-fearing women in my life. Hope you enjoy this journey with me as we learn to smile at the future. Now let's dive right in. Hi, ladies, and welcome to episode number 13. One of the roles that God has given many of us is the privilege of being an auntie. This is another example of a topic that hasn't been written much on, or at least I couldn't find many resources online except for random articles on how to be the cool aunt. But today we're going to dive into this a little more and hopefully give you some practical application of how you can be invested in the lives of your nieces and nephews. I'm interviewing another longtime friend named Bridget Jackson, who is not only an auntie, but also a mom to twins with one on the way. Bridget loves ministry, baking, and ultimate frisbee. And just on a fun note about Bridget, I was hired at the ministry that I work for now as her replacement when she left on maternity leave. But I didn't realize the big shoes I was expected to fill. Bridget had the habit of bringing baked desserts to work each week for the staff. And so when I started there, a few coworkers joked with me and asked if I was going to carry on the tradition. So not wanting to let anyone down, I have been bringing baked desserts to work almost every week for the past 2 years. I'm definitely not complaining, and it has been a fun tradition to carry the Bridget Baked Goods torch now, but just thought that was a funny tidbit for you there on Bridget. And if you have a topic or a comment that you would like to suggest, please send those to smilingатthefuturepodcast@gmail.com. And also, it would be very helpful for me if you would leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. And now, please sit down and join me for my conversation with Bridget. Welcome on the show, Bridget. I'm so excited for you to talk to our listeners about the importance of the auntie life. And you are an auntie to 17 nieces and nephews, and you've been an aunt for 15 years. And I think you have a unique perspective because not only were you an aunt for that long, but you also are a mother now of twins and one on the way. So you have kind of that unique perspective of being an aunt, but also seeing the impact that aunts have on your own children. So we're just excited for you to share. And I also wanted to just lay some foundation here before we jump into our questions. I think it's something, this role is something that we can take seriously from the Lord. It's not a biblical mandate, but it's one of those roles that God has given women, and a lot of single ladies are aunts, and it's one of those relationships that is lifelong, and it's a way you can invest in the next generation. God is the one who designed the family unit, and this is one of those relationships that He has designed. And you really do have a choice of how invested you're going to be. And it's also a way that you can practice being more nurturing. I think nurturing is a really crucial part of being feminine, and God designed women to be that. And so it's caring for the growth and development of someone or something is the definition of being nurturing. So it's a way for women to really grow in that character quality of femininity. So I didn't know if you wanted to share anything on those lines here today, just about being an auntie. Do you want to share anything along those thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me to do this. Yeah, I think being an aunt is a privilege. It's certainly a sweet blessing. It's a very unique role. I can say being an aunt versus a mom is 100% different, but it's unique in its own ways. I think you have a special bond, especially if you live close to your nieces and nephews. I know my twin sister, she has 6 kids, and living close to her kids, I am much, much closer to them just because of the distance certainly separates us. But there's just a unique bond there, and being able to spend and invest the time, even when I was single, I think it was such a sweet blessing. And even her older children, I feel like I have a closer bond to because I was able to spend more time with them. But I would also say that if you're desiring to be a mom, it gives you a very realistic idea of what motherhood looks like versus always fun and always a sweet blessing, which it is. But I think your expectations are realistic in the sense that, children are learning and growing and sinful and need to be taught right from wrong and throw tantrums. And when you live life with children, that can even come from babysitting, you just get a much better perspective on what that will look like when you have your own family. And I think being around my sister and her family specifically, just even watching her parent, as I'm spending time with my nieces and nephews, is a sweet blessing. You just soak in all that. You just get to learn what it looks like. And she's such a role model to me of what it looks like to be a godly mother and to respond rightly, in the moment, and to teach and train your children in the ways of the Lord. So I think it's a blessing both ways. You can be a blessing because you can help out a lot when you're there, but you learn a lot too. And it's not like, you sit down and say, just teach me everything you know about motherhood. You just live life with someone else, specifically my sister. And I think that's a privilege too. So I think being an aunt is a win-win both ways. I know it's always a blessing, even being on the other side now and having my sisters involved in my children's life, is really sweet to watch. But they love it too. So I think it's a win-win.
And there aren't a lot of biblical examples of ants in the Bible, but the one I wanted to briefly talk about here, because I think it's a good example and it's inspiring for Christian ants, is the story of, in 2 Kings 11, of Ahaziah's sister Jehosheba. I'm probably going to butcher all these Old Testament names here, but she rescued her nephew from his grandmother, Athaliah, who was killing all the heirs of the throne after Ahaziah had passed away. So I wanted to just read that story. It's only a few verses, but I thought it was just a good example and role model of bravery and self-sacrifice. So we're going to start in 2 Kings chapter 11. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death. And she put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus they hid them from Athaliah so that he was not put to death. And he remained with her 6 years, hidden in the house of the Lord, while Athaliah reigned over the land. And if you know the end of the story, you know that he was placed as king. God used that act of bravery to restore a godly king in Israel. So yeah, just an example of devotion and bravery and self-sacrifice. And she cared for him for 6 years secretly. So I just loved that story of an aunt stepping in and being a godly example to a nephew. And of course, there's lots of stories of uncles in the Bible. You have Abraham and Lot. You have Mordecai and Esther. So other examples that we could pull from, but that's just the one I wanted to share with the listeners today. A lot of aunts aren't in proximity to their nieces and nephews.
Yeah, I think maybe some of the more obvious ones are, remember their birthday and be purposeful to send cards and whatnot. They get to a certain age and they get really excited about pen pals. And so, if Auntie becomes a pen pal, that's very exciting I know I did that with one of my nieces, and she just loved it. Anytime she got a card or a letter from me, and it's not hard, it just takes a few minutes to send a little note, and, but it can really make their day. And then they get to send something back, and it's just really cute to watch that kind of excitement. And I think just to bond in that way, just even over snail mail, it's different nowadays, I don't think we write as many letters, but it can be very, very fun for them.
Yeah, just the joy of receiving a letter is so novel these days.
Yeah. Well, and then even to get something from them is so fun. It's just really cute to see, their little handwriting and misspelled words. But yeah, I think that, and just stay interested. And the older they get, stay interested in what they're interested in, even when they're young. Ask about the things that are important to them. Make sure to be purposeful in that. And then I think when they do get older, instead of just like I call my sisters here and there, and it can be easy to just talk to them and not be as involved in my nieces specifically. My other sister has four nieces and or four children, my nieces, and just to ask, to talk to them. Is Katie there? Can I talk to Katie and just have she's 15 years old, just to have a conversation with her and not just say hi on FaceTime when she pops in, to actually be purposeful to want to, oh, I called to talk to her, not just her mom, because I think it shows how much you care and how much you really do want to know about her life. And it's just a way to show Christ like love. It takes effort. I think it takes time. And even though you might not be able to relate in as many areas as you can, your sister or whatever, just to show a real interest there. And even I know to my sister Kelly, it's really important to her that we ask about her children and how they're doing, and even their schooling and different things like that, just because it matters to her, that it shows that we care about her and her family. And I know she's mentioned that before, how much that means to her. So I think just being really purposeful, not just to talk, but to ask a lot about what's going on, what are they doing? And then when you do find out those interests, just to ask them more, and show a real interest there.
That's really cool. I was thinking even like if you're a lot of people are doing things through Zoom. And so you could have like a sit down dinner with your nieces and nephews. And that's one way to like, if they're younger, to get them to sit still in front of a camera for a longer period of time. You could just like, yeah, take them out to dinner over Zoom. You could do puppet shows on Zoom. Like there's so many creative things that you can do just on video chat. But one thing, like especially if you have younger nieces and nephews, and I did this with Gabrielle, my niece, when she was in Africa, and it's going to sound really silly, but I came up with my own little jingle, like this little song that I would sing every time I talk to her. And kids, just relate really well with music, and that can stick in their mind. And so I would do this little jingle every time I talked to her, and she kind of knew it was me and just kind of had that little like tied me with this. And then my brothers tried to like sing it a few times and try to sabotage my jingle. I'm like, no, it's my jingle. And then
Oh, that's
my
cute.
mom had the creative idea of she bought a certain perfume and then would wear it every time she came to visit. And then when they went away, she sent the perfume with Michelle so that like every time she talked to her, my sister could pull it out and like, I don't know, just have like that scent, because they say scent is the strongest memory trigger. So just having that way to remember somebody. So there's fun little things you can do with younger kids to help them remember you.
My parents have watched my sister's kids a lot. Every single time they were with them, they would show them pictures of auntie and uncle, or auntie and uncle, and then the kids, the cousins, always going over the pictures to remind them, just because we weren't with them and we, saw them like twice a year, but just so that like they knew who we were and could remember, and that, it was a big deal in their lives too, not just somebody that like a stranger that they saw twice a year. So I thought that was sweet.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And my aunt, my mom's sister, lived in New York, but she would come and visit us like once a year. It was interesting. She was a musician, and so she wrote songs about the Lord, and she taught us hand motions. And so every time she would visit, she would play the songs and we would get to sing along and do these little hand motions. And even when she was from afar, we could do that. She would sing the song and we could kind of interact with her in that way. And so that was one of our really special memories with her as younger kids. It's funny how you brought out like talking, making sure that you're investing not only in your sister or brother, but also the children. And actually at my point, I wrote down on one of my points here to remember to interact with the adults and not just the children. Cause I have,
That's when they're babies.
yeah.
Or like younger, I feel like.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm like, I run in and I'm like, where's Gabrielle? And I like go straight to hugging her and everything and just like leave my sister in the dust and have to remember, okay, he's important too. And I love and value her and I need to show that as well. Okay, so next question. What unique impact do aunts have in the lives of their nieces and nephews that maybe their parents don't have? Or I don't know if you wanted to rephrase that in another way, but do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I think when an aunt is really involved in, their nieces or nephew's life, I think it can, in a good way, maybe, I think this answers the question. It reiterates the same truth, that the parents are enforcing. So, even if you're babysitting them or, you're emphasizing those same things, that we do not lie, we do not, do things that are selfish, and then they see that like that Christ-like response it's the same from Auntie, it's the same from mom and dad. So it's not just mom and dad who always discipline them. It's like Auntie reinforcing those same truths. And I think for them, that can have a big impact on, oh, this really does matter. It's not just mom and dad always telling us right from wrong. So I think just pointing them to what will satisfy them the most in the Lord. And I think there can be joy in that, and you could just have a bond with them. I think the older they get, they might open up to you in different ways. And sometimes I think as an aunt, that might be your nieces specifically. But you can ask them questions, once they get to even the dating stage or whatever, they might open up and tell you things that and I feel like if you have that relationship, if you've been close to them all along and they feel like you're like a best friend that they can talk to, and that you've shown that trustworthiness, that they're going to open up and maybe tell you things that they wouldn't necessarily tell mom and dad, and you can just enforce that same truth that mom and dad would had they mentioned it to them or whatnot.
That's a good point. And you never want to undermine the authority of the parents and their discipline. That's really important to not ever, you want to reinforce all the parenting that they're doing and not undermine any of that. This wasn't on my list, but maybe you have just on the spur of the moment a thought on this with discipline. As an aunt, how do you discipline your nieces and nephews? I know that's probably not always possible, but were there things that you would do to help keep them in line if you were watching them or babysitting them?
That's a good question. I know that my sister, I had mentioned to her that I was doing this with you, and she's like, "Oh, just make sure you mention that aunts need to discipline when the parents want." Oh. Because I was so bad at that. But I think in the sense that I wasn't a mom yet. And I think now that I'm a mom, I'm like, I have no problem like disciplining Tara's children if she wanted me to do that. Some of them are older now, but it's different. I think just knowing the importance of it as a mom who disciplines all day long, but at the same time, it's hard as an aunt. It's very, very hard, especially when I think it just depends on the parents, because I think that, once her children got a little bit older, she just said, if they're not obeying, you need to put a mark on their hand. And as many marks as they get is how many spankings they'll get when we get home, type of a thing. If they're younger, of course, 1, 2 years old, you don't necessarily want to wait several hours or the next day just because they don't really know what they're getting disciplined for. But it can be so easy, just like, oh, if they tell you to discipline, to just give them a little tap on the hand and say no, and it's not effective versus like a real spanking. So I would say if your sibling asks you to discipline, that you need to do that just out of, they're only doing it to keep with the consistency of, what is right and wrong, and you don't get away with things just because your aunt is here. You don't act different. It's still an authority figure in your life. So I think you just need to establish that respect. And if they're asking you to discipline, to do that. I know that different parents have different views on other people disciplining their children. But I think it also depends on, like, if you spend a lot of time with them, it is important, I think, to stay consistent in that area, do what they're asking because it's only helpful, and it's just like, everybody knows that if you go on vacation for a week and you're spending time with, relatives or whoever, and all they're doing, the kids are just getting spoiled. And then you come home and the parents have to deal with that the next week or 2 or 3, just on correcting all that behavior that maybe they got away with a little bit more. So I think it's just be a blessing to the parents. If they're asking you to discipline, I think you need to do that.
Yeah. That's a very clear conversation you need to have, and not just discipline. If they don't ask you to do that, you need to make sure that's their expectation, how they want it done, that you're following their guidelines exactly. I think that's really important. How does your involvement bless the parents of your nieces and nephews?
Yeah, I think there's just a different comfort level with family. It's just a sweet bond when you can see the joy, that the joy that it brings to both the aunt and the niece or nephew, when they get to be around their aunt or uncle. I just think it's so sweet to see that kind of an excitement in a child, and I know that it's a blessing to the parents just to watch somebody love on their child in a really unique way. It's like a parent and a child are going to have a different bond than a parent and a friend's kid. And it's the same way with an aunt. An aunt is always going to bond, closer than just any other child that they know. Or, even if it's a child they babysit often, it's just a unique bond. It's blood. It's so sweet to see just that kind of joy. And so I think being around a family member that is going to love your child unconditionally and just love your child no matter what, it's unique. It's not conditional. It's not based on how they're acting that day. They're, even if it was all they did was throw tantrums, they're still going to leave loving their niece or nephew. Just knowing that, that they're purposeful too, I think is just really important and sweet. So I just think it's a very unique role that you're not going to get from anyone else.
I think too, if you're very hands-on and you show up to things and, show your investment with your time commitment, is really huge. And I know just with my own sister, when I'm involved and being there and playing with her, giving her a chance to just rest or put her feet up if she needs to, I know that that's a huge blessing for her. And also just with the world these days and the crazy culture that we live in, there's not many people that parents trust to babysit their children. And so you have that established trust and relationship, offering to babysit and, giving them that time away and that time as parents that they need to rest and recuperate is really a way that you can serve them. And also, I think I was thinking through this, a lot of times parents are tired, they've been chasing around a toddler all day. And so as an aunt, you can show up and you can bring kind of a fresh new energy. And so I would encourage aunts to do things with their nieces and nephews that are more energetic, maybe running around at the park or getting their energy out. That is a huge help to moms and dads. Another idea is being the one to help plan parties and events and bringing that level of fun to the family. I know you always hear the term be the fun or cool aunt or whatever, but I think that's a really practical way that you can serve your family is by putting the time into making those special milestones and occasions extra special, and you have the time and energy to put into that. So being the one to even plan the baby shower or starting even that early, being invested in their life, and then the birthdays, making them special. And
I think that's great. And just even you think about what an example it is to your nieces and nephews of, just spending time with your sister or brother, whoever that might be, just showing them the importance of loving and caring for your siblings. Just me wanting to spend time with my sister and be at her house shows my sister's children as well just what a unique bond siblings have in general. Just what a privilege it is to have siblings, and to to enjoy them and time spent. So I think just even that relationship between you and your sibling can show your nieces and nephews a lot.
Yeah, that's a good example to them to have those close friendships as well. My mom always told us growing up that your siblings are your friends for life. So we got to establish those relationships and friendships early on. And kind of going along with the fun things, do you have examples of outings and fun activities that you do with your nieces and nephews?
I think there's a number of things. I think it's good to, you had mentioned, they get older if there's like little soccer games, or my nephews were in jujitsu and they would have tournaments every once in a while. And just to show up at those events, to make the effort to do that. You've got your own busy life too, but just to, even if it's not something you're overly excited about, just to be excited for them, and it's simple when they're, 6 years old and they're doing different sports things. It can be not as exciting as maybe watching a high schooler, but just to show interest there and to be on the sidelines cheering them on, and to be overly excited, they get so happy to see you there, and you just see that little joy on their faces. And so I think showing an interest in what they're interested in, but also, I used to play a lot of ultimate frisbee, and a couple of times I brought my nephew, and he was young, and it was more work to have him there, certainly, and not as fun for me, but just to see, like, he had begged to come so many times, and to see the little joy on his face when he got to be there, and around all the people that I spend time with Saturday morning is just really sweet, so to involve them in what you're doing too, I think can be just a sweet bonding time for the both of you. And take them out for ice cream, take them on little dates. I think especially kids that come from bigger families, just to spend one-on-one time with, just pick one of them and go take them out and do something special for a couple hours. And, so you can chat with them and be purposeful. It's because I think they spend a lot of time with their siblings, just to show a real interest in their life personally, I think can be really sweet. And there's a lot you can do, but even just finding out what's important to them, where they like to eat, where they like, what's their favorite dessert, just take them there, or take them to a park, go do something fun, just, I think even remembering when I was dating, my husband, and just, we would pick my two nephews up and take them to church because my sister had just had a baby, or, just do different things just with the two oldest, just because, they could, and the other ones were a little bit more clueless, but, just to spend, include them even in that, like the dating life, and just every little season that I was going through, it means a lot to them, I think too. So
That's really important. I have to speak a little bit about my uncle. So this is not an auntie relationship, but an uncle relationship. And our family doesn't have a lot of extended family. So our uncle lived close by and just was front and center in our lives. And so I wanted to give some of the examples of things he would do with us. He never married, but he just, invested so much of his time and life into us, his nieces and nephews. And he would take us hiking and backpacking, and he would travel quite a bit. But every Christmas, he would collect little souvenirs and things from all of his travels, and he would have a gift bag with our name on it. And every Christmas, we'd open that up, and that was one of our highlights. We would look forward to these gift bags every year, and it would have just fun and interesting things like astronaut ice cream, or like a t-shirt from like the Grand Canyon, or, just different places he was going. He was always thinking about us and looking for ways to bless us. And he was just such a cheerleader in our lives, cheering us on, encouraging us. He would come to every birthday party. And, when you have a family of 7 kids, there's a lot of birthday parties. And he would film all of them, take pictures. He was always behind the scenes, but he was always there. And he had this box too. We would go over to his house. He had this box of optical illusion toys that he would bring out, just like silly things like that. But we loved it as kids. And yeah, just finding ways to bring in fun and he was really invested in science and creation. And so he would teach us a lot about God's creation. When we were out hiking, he'd tell us about the flowers and plants we were passing. And yeah, just showed us, like, taught us a new quality about God and his creativity and power in creation. And so, yeah, as a niece, having that investment in my life and that legacy, I want to be that to my nieces and nephew coming March 3rd. But it's just, yeah, been such a good role model. And I know his life has impacted all of us for the better. So, yeah, I just from personal experience, I'm a new auntie myself, seeing the impact that an uncle or an aunt can have on the lives of their nieces and nephews, and experiencing that firsthand just makes me really excited about being able to carry that on and pass it along to the next generation. So just had to share all that because Uncle Dave has been the best uncle ever. Okay, and then the last question here. How can you be a godly example for unbelieving family members as an aunt?
I think this one it can be a little trickier when you live further away, but I know that I have tried to send, children's books that are Christian books, because there's a lot of fun ones out there that just have Christian themes at the heart of them, or R.C. Sproul has done quite a few, or just sending them a Bible, or, just, of course, I think it would depend on where the parents were at. Like if they asked you not to do that type of thing, that would be a lot harder. But also, if you live close to them, and the parents are fine with you taking them to church or offering to take them to youth group or, anything like that, if you can have that kind of investment where they're going often to Sunday school, or you just never know the impact that could have, if they got saved through that. And certainly their parents would also, could also get saved just by watching their children know and learn the truth. So I think never give up on the opportunities, especially if they're nearby, just on spending time and sharing the gospel truth as often as you possibly can. And especially from a very young age when, if they haven't formed opinions yet, and so just to speak of truth as truth, just even in the small things, you can take them to the park and talk about God's creation, and just always be talking, even more than probably you usually would, just because they don't get it at home. Just always be talking about the things of the Lord and what the Lord's given us and what he's done, and the gospel, just presenting it as often as you can. And I think as long as the parents are okay with it, you can just be a real light in their lives, just such a joyful example, and to make Christ attractive, to show them how much fun Christians do have, and just that there's more joy in a Christian than there ever will be in the world without Christ. I think you can have such an impact there, and just even putting them around other Christian families or friends, or, just allowing them to develop those relationships with people that that they might not have had they not been around you and your friends. So, just to see that light in every aspect.
Yeah. Maybe even like sharing with them the answers to prayer, like showing them real time how God has heard your prayers and answered them. And you can just, show that awe and wonder that the King of creation heard my prayer and answered in this way. And even involving them in praying for certain things too, maybe would be a way to get them excited and to show them God's answers. I think another important part of being an auntie and investing in the spiritual life of your nieces and nephews is just praying regularly for them, and praying for them, like even if you're at meals, not being secret in your prayers, but just praying that Lord help them to love you, and speaking truth over them in prayer. And yeah, just letting them know that you love and care for them in that way also. Any other thoughts on auntyhood you want to share today, Bridget?
I would say don't neglect your role as an aunt in in any possible way, especially when you're single, as much as you possibly can. And even when you're not, once you, even if you have one child or two children, and I just think, allowing the cousins to spend time together, and I just think it's such a unique season just to invest. I know I just enjoyed being around my sister and her family because I didn't have a family yet. But I would just say, even when you don't feel like that, when you'd rather go home and take a nap or just do something for yourself, go be a blessing to your sibling and siblings, I should say, or just go be a blessing to your nieces and nephews. And like they bring so much joy to your life, and I think, like I said before, it is a win-win. It's just a unique relationship that you don't have with anybody else in the world. And I think just be so purposeful to always be a blessing. I think that's our goal, as Christians, is to love others as we love ourselves, and to love the Lord the most. And so I think when you're investing in other people's lives and showing them how much you care, it's just so purposeful. And just don't underestimate the eternal value of spending time with your nieces and nephews, and just having such an impact and a role in their lives, and just being purposeful to be a blessing to your siblings as well, just in spending that time. I think never underestimate that. Or, I think as a mom and watching my sister's involvement in my children's lives, it can never be enough. Like there's never a time where I would want them to spend less time with my children. It's always more, and so I think just realizing that too, just to be so purposeful and just pouring out love upon love, and spending your time, your energy, your money, you'll never regret it. Honestly, it is a real blessing. Thank the Lord for it.
And I would say too, if you're finding that you don't have the time to invest in your nieces and nephews, maybe it comes down to just reprioritizing, cutting some things out. Do you need to cut out social media? Do you need to cut out Netflix? What is it that's taking hours of your day that does not have an eternal reward? And I'm really glad that you brought that out, Bridget, because relationships are the things that matter to God. And He made those and made us to be in relationship with others, and especially family. And so stewarding that well, taking it seriously, that we are going to give an account for these relationships before the Lord someday. And God works in the mundane. You hear that a lot with moms just day in and day out mothering, and how sometimes it just feels not like it doesn't really feel like you're storing up treasure in heaven or doing these great ministry feats in a sense, but that's how God works. And even being an aunt and investing might not feel like this huge ministry opportunity, but over time, your faithful involvement will produce fruit. And it's never too late to start. I think if you're feeling a little guilty for your lack of involvement, just pray about it and start today. Call up your niece or nephew, or invite them on an outing, or whatever it is. Don't feel weird about establishing that relationship today. God gives us a fresh start every morning. So encourage you to not be afraid of that. And I have one last bonus question for you. It's a little bit off topic, but it does come up when I am chatting about these things with other single women. So here it is. So yeah, if you're not naturally a baby woman or someone who gravitates towards children, does that mean that you don't have the mom gene in you?
Which is a good question. I think it's funny that you asked that question, because my identical twin sister didn't really like children. She thought they were smelly and gross. And now she has 6. So she got married and they had kids just shortly after that. And they don't know if they're done yet, and they have 6. And I desired to be married since I was in high school and wanted children. And the Lord didn't have that for me until I was almost 34, the children part. And so I think the Lord obviously changed her heart tremendously. She was a nurse, and she kind of thought she would be doing that for a while. And once she started having children, she just kept having children. And like I said, now she doesn't even know if she's done after 6, and she's got twins, and life is very, very busy for her. And so I think the Lord can change that in your heart. I think too, when you look at, I'm not a baby person, you have to also ask yourself, why would you say that? It's like people that say, oh, I never want to be married. Well, why do you never want to be married? Is it because you want to spend your life serving the Lord? Then that's commendable. Do you not want children because you want to serve the body of Christ instead? I think you just have to reevaluate, because a lot of times when people say they're not baby people, it means they don't want the difficulties of of what it means to have a baby and care for a baby, and also not understanding you can't possibly know what a joy it is to have a child until you have had children. And I think that's where my sister comes in, thinking, oh, children are gross, but that was before she had children. That was before she was an aunt. She just didn't have a lot of experience with children. And just because you don't absolutely adore other people's children doesn't mean you won't adore your own. And praying and asking the Lord, to give you that desire, if that, is something that you feel like you should have more of. But I think just because you're not naturally drawn towards babies or babysitting or serving in the nursery or those types of things doesn't mean you're not going to love being a mom. I don't think they're related, because I think the bond that a mother and a child have are completely different than any other child on the planet, of course. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not cut out to be a mom just because I don't gravitate towards babies. I think the Lord, it's a unique season of life, and it's a blessing that you can't possibly know until you become one, certainly.
Yeah, that's really helpful for you to state it that way. And I've heard so many other women who have said that as well, that they loved being a mom, but they didn't necessarily love babysitting before they had children, and how God gives you that love for your child. It's a unique bond and love, like you said. And probably kind of the overlap when you brought out like someone who maybe doesn't love the idea of marriage, maybe you're not in love with the idea of marriage, but it is a person who, if you have this in your mind that you're married to this unknown human being, that can sound really scary and not very fun. But, it's the person, it's the relationship that's going to make marriage something you want to do and participate in. So same thing with mothering. I think it is that special, unique human being that is part of you and part of your husband. And that's really why it's so special. That was a little bonus question for you there. Thank you, Bridget. That was awesome that you shared on that. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on. Thank your husband for watching your twins so that you could have a quiet moment aside to talk with me. And I know it'll be a fun topic for all the aunties out there to inspire them to just really embrace this role that God has given them.